comes down to this. We're faced with an enemy who are determined to destroy us, and we have no hope of negotiating a peace. Unless that changes, we are justified in doing anything we can to survive.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Now he has the war.
Earlier today, I was briefed by my Homeland Security team on the events.
Rupert Murdoch's News Corp dominates the American, Britain, Asian, and Middle Eastern media markets. He owns 175 newspapers, including the Times of London and the New York Post, 100 cable TV channels, including Fox, and 19 sports channels, 9 satellite and 40 regular TV networks, 40 publishing houses, and a movie studio. His media empire stretches across 5 continents, reaching a TV audience of 280 million in America and 300 million in Asia. His magazines reach 28 million. With all outlets combined together, Murdoch's media empire reaches 4.7 billion people. That's billion with a B. And that's 3/4 of the world's population.
And so, without further ado, here it is. And now, Musketeers, here's something we want you always to remember.
For years, this nation has counted on the military to defend itself against.
They can't stand free. The evildoers, they can't stand.
We're also making life difficult around the world in a number of other countries. So
is not neutral between them.
So that seems to be a major theme here.
To reach out, nobody should have hurt feelings. My goodness, this is politics. Politics is rough and tumble, and people need to get thick skin, just like I've done.
Everything you read in the mainstream media is 100% true. Please, go back to your jobs. If you have not got a job, you are a worthless human being. Consume, consume, consume until we have no planet left to consume. What you need to do is buy things that you don't need. That's the best way to support the economy. Smiling is bad for the economy. Please do not smile. Please, move swiftly to your next shopping experience. It's very important for children to be trained in ripping people's bodies to shreds. So come and buy some games with lots of killing and destruction and war. Independent thoughts lead to chaos. Thinking is boring. Thinking is hard work, and it's not worth the energy. If you see a Buddhist on the street, try and get them to leave their religion.
I know the secret of making the average American believe anything I want him to. Just let me control television. Americans are wired into their television sets. Over the last 30 years, they have come to look at their television sets and the images on the screen as reality. You put something on television and it becomes reality. If the world outside the television set contradicts the images, people start changing the world to make it more like the images and sounds of their television. Because its influence is so great, so pervasive, it has become part of their lives. You lose your sense of what is being done to you, but your mind is being shaped and molded. Hal Becker, Futures Group think tank veteran, 1981.
In 1992, Paul Wolfowitz, working in the Department of Defense, was asked to write the first draft of a new national security strategy. In their defining document, written in September of 2000, a full year before 9/11, they acknowledged that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one. Absent, in their own chilling words, some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year later, that event would arrive.
America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there were an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world government. Henry Heinz Kissinger.
Every day on television stations all over the world, journalists and correspondents give their viewers the official version of the event they are reporting. White House sources say this, the Prime Minister says that, the FBI says the other. In all my time in journalism, I cannot recall a single conversation in a newsroom that didn't reflect the official version of life and the world. Most journalists are not manipulating. They are simply stunningly uninformed and often incredibly arrogant. They believe that if anything of magnitude was going on, they would know about it because they are journalists. In truth, they are the last to know. David Icke, The Biggest Secret.
David Rockefeller said it all in his 1991 Trilateral Commission meeting speech. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the work is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. For those that are wondering what autodetermination means, simply put, we are too stupid to think for ourselves. We should be treated as farm animals and nothing more. Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller. Oh, and I don't mean to insult farm animals. President Dwight Eisenhower's speechwriter, Wilson Bryan Key, wrote a book called The Age of Manipulation, all about his experience writing presidential speeches. For 36 sleepless hours, 3 writers turned out draft after draft, reviewed by a White House deputy press secretary who offered terse comments like, much too specific, ease up on factual references, and take it back, fuzz it up, fuzz it up. We discovered eventually meant avoid all clear factual statements about anything more specific than the time of day. The speech was endlessly discussed for likely audience reactions, belief and attitude reinforcements, and implied meanings. Would anyone take the empty rhetoric seriously? The speech read smoothly, but said absolutely nothing about anything. This was precisely what it was intended to say. During audience interviews after the oration, most expressed satisfaction with the great man's words, like, Ike really gave it to them. He has my vote. I like the way he thinks. Great speech. And folks, that was back in the 1950s, so you can just imagine how much more manipulative and polished they've become at this game.
In March 1915, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel, shipbuilding, and powder interest, and their subsidiary organizations got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press. They found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought to be paid for by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interests of the purchasers. U.S. Congressman Oscar Callaway, 1917. What folly is this? Toasting an independent press? There is no such thing at this date of the world's history in America as an independent press. You know it, and I know it. There's not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions, and if you did, you know beforehand that it would never appear in print. I am paid weekly for keeping my honest opinion out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who would be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be out on the streets looking for another job. If I allowed my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper before 24 hours, my occupation would be gone. The business of the journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is this, toasting an independent press? We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. John Swinton, New York journalist at the Independent Press Banquet, 1887.
In our hearts, we are truth seekers, intuitive and curious about all that surrounds us. We are born with amazing natural abilities that we've long ago forgotten about. But just the same, they're there, just dormant. Around the world, those natural crystalline powers are beginning to resurface. For a few hundred years, we've been manipulated by all we've been born into. Everything we've learned, seen, eaten, experienced has been put there by design. But you already know this in your heart. Like any treasure, it only needs to be uncovered and exposed to our innate awareness. You will begin to see everything for what it is, and then you'll stop looking outside of yourself and simply realize you are all you've been waiting for. You are the engine of your collective futures, and no one, anywhere, can tell you differently.